As much as I love Star Wars, as much as I love G.I. Joe, my number one thing has always been Indiana Jones. I love the film franchise, I love the series. So what I'm doing today is I'm giving you 5 fantastic Indiana Jones video games, as well as 5 games inspired by our intrepid archaeologist. Let's take a look.
As a longtime fan of LucasArts point-and-click adventure games, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade is one of the few tie-ins to this movie that actually works, because the NES game and the Super Nintendo game are god-awful. As is the ZX Spectrum version of the game that you can check out on my friend Generation Pixel's video, link in the card on screen right now. Be sure to watch that and enjoy as he stomachs his way through this god-awful game. But this one here, this particular version of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, works amazingly well. So it's got all the charm of every LucasArts point-and-click adventure game that you've ever played. So if you enjoy games like The Secret of Monkey Island, if you enjoy games like Maniac Mansion, you will love this game because it is in that same vein, that same style, and with that same sense of humor. Now, it does follow the storyline of the movie pretty well, but it takes liberties here and there. Definitely check this one out if you haven't had the opportunity. I bought this one on GOG, which is a fantastic website, and you can get this one pretty cheap any day of the week, so definitely worth checking out if you like point-and-click adventure games. It doesn't get more directly inspired by Indiana Jones than Sydney Hunter. And the latest adventure, Sydney Hunter and the Curse of Mayans, is about as much an indie adventure as you can get. I mean, you play a guy in a fedora with a whip, and you're exploring tombs, and you're trying to find artifacts, and you're making your way through these grand adventures and fighting superpowered beings. It's Indiana Jones. You're just not Indy. You're a short little squat guy named Sydney Hunter, and the gameplay is magnificent. It's such a fun and challenging game that's very much a throwback to classic 8-bit and 16-bit adventures that it just works. Like, this feels like it should have released on the NES, in my opinion. That's high praise. It feels like a classic game that time forgot, and it plays brilliantly well today. I've got this one on the Switch, but you can get this elsewhere as well. There's actually, I believe, a Sydney Hunter collection coming out for the Evercade, which is pretty baller. That's awesome. Check out Sydney Hunter and the Curse of the Mayan and any other Sydney Hunter games that you can find, because they are superlative adventures. Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis is another point-and-click adventure from LucasArts, but this one does something really special. It tells a completely unique story. This is not something that's adapted. This is a brand new adventure for Indiana Jones to go on, and interestingly enough, this is the first game that incorporates voice. So not only do you have, well, not like the first game ever that incorporates voice, you know what I mean. The first Indiana Jones game that has voice in it. So not only do you have this great story, but you also have Indiana Jones narrating and actively speaking to you as you play. It's a wonderful title. There's a great sense of humor at play in this one. So whereas Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade kind of stuck pretty closely to the movie's plotline, this one doesn't have that same restraint. It actually is able to be a little bit sillier and a little bit more slapstick, which not necessarily what you want with an Indiana Jones game, but for this game, it really works. The plotline is fantastic, the characters are memorable, and this is one I was actually hoping that they would eventually adapt into a film because I thought the storyline was that strong. Here's one I hadn't played until recently. This is called Strange Brigade, and this one is less direct Indiana Jones correlation and more just kind of pulp hero inspired. This is an over-the-top third-person shooter where you are controlling one of 4 characters and you're fighting zombies. Well, I guess resurrected mummies, but they're basically zombies. You're in Egypt and yeah, whatever. It's a really fun title. It's very clever. There's a lot of really neat interactions that go on here. So basically what's happening is one of these 4 characters, you're part of the Strange Brigade, and everything is presented kind of like an old-timey radio serial or a movie newsreel, where it's like, what will happen next to our grand adventurers? It's very tongue-in-cheek, and it just works. The gameplay is silky smooth. It runs beautifully well on my Series X, which, I mean, you'd kind of hope for since it was an Xbox One game, but I just really appreciate that this game leans into its pulp roots and just has fun with it. If you dig third-person shooters, check this one out. Indiana Jones and the Emperor's Tomb is an entry from the original Xbox, and while it's a little bit clunky by today's standards, this was kind of exciting to get. So It's a really good third-person adventure. Just understand that this is released in like 2004, 2005, so design sensibilities have changed, adventure sensibilities have changed a bit, so it's a little bit clunky, like I said. The controls are okay, but it's not going to be as like pervasively easy to play as something that's going to be released today. Now, the adventure itself is really fun, and being able to control Indy in this regard is the first time it really felt like we were controlling Indiana Jones himself. You are able to go through all of these amazing environments and fight these bad guys, and it feels like an Indiana Jones adventure. It just feels like an Indiana Jones adventure with slight limitations based on hardware limitations at the time. It's definitely fun. It's definitely still worth looking into, and I think there's a really solid storyline at play here. I would definitely be playing this one more for the story than the gameplay, but it's still a good experience overall. I've talked about Spelunky on the channel in the past, and today we're going to talk about its sequel, Spelunky 2. These are less story-driven adventures and more just get in there, find the artifacts, get out, and fight the boss. This is a roguelike game where the levels are going to shift and change every single time you play, but as you can see by the character you're controlling, as well as the original protagonist from the first game, it's very heavily Indy-inspired. You've got a fedora, you've got a whip, you're climbing up ropes and finding different items and fighting bad guys in your way through these massive tombs and massive temples to find the artifact and collect the treasure. And of course, there's snakes. Why did it have to be snakes? And the snakes are deadly, just like everything in Spelunky. This is a straight-up hard game. This takes NES hard, laughs at it, eats its lunch, and then pushes it in a locker. It's that difficult, but it's brilliant. This is one that I've come back to for years. I love this series, and it is so much a love letter to Indiana Jones that you've got to check it out. Anyone that's been on the channel for any length of time knows I am a huge fan of the LEGO games. I think Traveler's Tale does remarkable work with every license that they acquire, and we actually were lucky enough to get 2 LEGO Indiana Jones games back on Generation 6. The one I'm talking about here, though, is the first one, LEGO Indiana Jones, and this one covers the events of Raiders of the Lost Ark, the Temple of Doom, and Last Crusade, and it tells the story in the way that only the LEGO games can, by being completely irreverent with the way the games play, but wrapping that in just incredibly solid gameplay with a ton of replay value. This is one of the few games that I have really gone back to regularly to 100%. I'm usually not a completionist in that regard, but I just love the LEGO Indiana Jones games so much that I kept going back. I wanted to show off this level because this is kind of the iconic scene for Indy, right? This is the rolling boulder from Raiders of the Lost Ark, and you get to interact with that and actually experience that in this game. Love this one. It's absolutely fantastic. The second game is great as well. It also tells every single story, but includes Crystal Skull, so your mileage may vary on that one if you're not a fan of Crystal Skull. I personally don't hate it as much as most people do, but I do think this one here, LEGO Indiana Jones, the first game, is the stronger entry of the two. When I think of Indiana Jones-inspired titles, the first one that comes to mind for me is Tomb Raider. Lara Croft is basically a female Indiana Jones, and while I'm not a huge fan of the original Tomb Raider games, the remakes that released on the PS4 and the Xbox One, I think are absolutely magnificent. I love the Rise of the Tomb Raider, Shadow of the Tomb Raider series. I think it's absolutely brilliantly done. The controls in the game are magnificent. I think it's a really cleverly designed game, and it reinvents Lara really well and makes her a little bit more human. She's a very different character than what she was in the original Tomb Raider games. I feel she's just more approachable and more human, and the adventures that she goes on in these 3 games are just magnificent. I'm still holding out hope that one day these will get ported over to the Switch because I think they're kind of tailor-made for the console. I would love to see them there, but I'm holding out hope. I'm not holding my breath. These games are magnificent, and they're dirt cheap nowadays, so if you haven't had a chance to play them, I definitely suggest you do so because I think the gameplay is wonderful, and it really shows Lara in a new light. This is Indiana Jones and the Staff of Kings for the Nintendo Wii, and I am blown away at how good this game is. Now, I will tell you right up front, I am not that far into this game. I am just starting to play this. I found this at my local store Second Chance a couple of weeks ago, and I'm just now getting around to playing it because I wanted to do it for this video. And I'm not going to lie to you, this is so cleverly designed and so well made that I'm having an absolute blast with it. It does feature motion controls, so if you're not a fan of those, you probably won't dig this game, but It does them so well that I don't feel like it's forced in whatsoever. Using the whip with the motion controls is fine. The punching, it's basically Punch-Out. It has the almost exact same control scheme as Punch-Out did on the Wii. The adventuring is great. The flight controls, like in the second level, you're flying a plane, and the flight controls, it just uses the Wii remote as a flight yoke, and it works amazingly well. There are different things that you're able to do in each level called glory maneuvers, where you have to pull off a certain task. It's kind of like an achievement. And one of the things that pulling off those maneuvers does is it unlocks stuff in the game. And one of my favorite things that it unlocks in here is Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis, the point-and-click adventure game that I talked about earlier. This game's incredible. When I think of games that belong in a museum, Uncharted comes to mind, and not in a bad way, belonging in a museum. They're my favorite Sony franchise. I love Nathan Drake as a character. He is the modern-day Indiana Jones. He is this generation's version of the character, and the adventures that we've gone on in every single Uncharted title, 1, 2, 3, and 4, are just magnificent. Being able to see Nate grow as a character from just a treasure-hunting con man in the first game to being a loving, caring family man who, yes, consistently messes up in the fourth game is something kind of remarkable. And seeing the adventures he goes on and this globe-trotting phenomenon that he just experiences in every single game just feels like Indy to me. These are magnificent titles. They are, again, my favorite Sony franchise out there, more than things like Sly Cooper, more than Ratchet and Clank. Uncharted is number one for me. These are magnificent adventures. They're emotional, they're fun, they're silly, they're everything you want in a modern-day Indiana Jones adventure.
There you have it, my friends. 5 games inspired by Indiana Jones and 5 featuring Indy himself. Let me know in the comments down below what's your favorite and if there are any more that you think I should play inspired by Indiana Jones. Until next time, folks, I've been Jay. Appreciate you spending a little bit of time with me. Remember to play more games, stay square, and take care. I'll talk to you soon.